Lords of America here with another episode of Weekly Dead. Now that the show's ended, we're going to go over the comic book. And we're going to cover it in trades because that's how it's kind of written to be read. The first volume is one called Days Gone By. Now, you may think there's a lot in common between the show and the comic book, but there's huge difference right off the bat. You know, while it's still Rick, and you'll still see Morgan in the first issue, you know, the first few pages, but the total original cast of characters is totally different. You have Donna and Ben, and you have several other different characters, and the characters themselves are different. Carl is a 7-year-old in this. In the show, he's made out to be about 10 to 11, and he's kind of gone up to about 13. Now, that being said, you know, of course, in the comic book, you can keep a character the same age indefinitely. So while the comic book has gone on 10 years, you know, timeline has only progressed about a year or so in the comic book throughout the 120 some odd issues that have done. Now, this will cover the first 6 issues. You meet Morgan, who, like the show, did help Rick out and kind of tell him about what was going on and convinced him to head towards Atlanta. But he's a much gentler Morgan in the comic book. You know, and Rick's a little more naive. Now, Rick in the show is from Georgia, and from the comic book, he is from Kentucky. So he has a little longer to go. Now, also, he heads down to Atlanta. He doesn't make it as far into Atlanta, but he's rescued by Glenn, and Glenn takes him to the rest of the party where he meets, surprisingly enough, his wife. And those plot points are similar, but what you don't notice is Shane sticks around very, very long in the TV show because the actor was such a good character, such a good villain in the show. They don't really have the same dynamic in the comic book. You know, it wasn't. They're much more small town. You know, it's very evident right off the bat that Shane is in love with Lori, or was wanting to take over being Lori's husband. And they get into an argument over this, and they get into a fight, and yeah, it concludes differently. So this first one, you're just meeting the cast of characters, and it's setting up, it's introducing you to this world. And, well, you know, the way it ends, you know, spoiler alert, Shane dies right off the bat. But the important thing is how Shane dies. I won't spoil that. I'll leave that for you to read. And it's very different than what it would be in the TV show. Not to mention, it's way earlier. It's much more monumental, a very key point for the series. And this first trade sets a serious, darker, dramatic tone. And the interesting thing is, on the first couple of pages, there's a preface by Kirkman saying why he wrote this book, what it's supposed to be, and how he loves zombie movies and always wants to know what happens next. And the goal of this book is to follow the main character, Rick, for the rest of his life, however long that may be. All right, well, I hope you're enjoying the new format. We're changing things up here, you know, on the Weekly Rex channel. Come see me at Comic City 2. Check us out during the podcast, Geeks of the Square Table, available at the Comic City 2 website or on iTunes. Check out the blog at Outright Geekery. See you next week.